Well, I think the numbers are kind of stabilizing, George.
Yep.
If that's okay, I'm going to kick us
Go for
off just to start. It is time for our keynote talk tonight. My name is Yael Grushka-Kane. I'm the chair of the session. However, I'm not the main show. I'm just here to introduce our distinguished speaker, and I will help run some of the Q&A at the end of our time together. So welcome, thank you for joining us. I will briefly introduce Dr. Saunders, who will be our speaker tonight or this evening, depending on where you are. And just a brief reminder for all of you who are joining, if you do have questions throughout the session, you can type them into the chat. You can type them in the Q&A. I will be watching and monitoring. You can also raise your hand, and later at the end, we will reserve the final 15 minutes or so for questions. And so please feel free to jot them down, and I will do my best to showcase your question or bring them up towards the end of our session when we have that opportunity to have a back and forth. So please, please, please jot down the questions so we have an interactive ending to this exciting session. It is my honor, true honor, and I've been waiting for a long time to introduce Dr. Nanda Saunders, an internationally recognized expert in forecasting, predictive analytics, risk management, enterprise digital transformation, and global supply chain intelligence. Dr. Saunders is a distinguished professor of supply chain management at Northeastern University, a fellow of the Decision Science Institute, and the president of POMS. She's the author of many, many books. Among them is The Hue Machine, which we're going to hear about today in a talk titled The Hue Machine, Humankind, Machines, and the Future of the Enterprise. Huge questions that are really intriguing many, many people around us, especially today. Dr. Saunders' research includes identifying best practicing for forecasting, developing corporate technology strategy, and creating resilient supply chains. No more, cutting edge important topics today that we all know are at the front and center of people's minds. Her teaching includes advanced supply chain management, supply chain strategy, supply chain analytics, and forecasting, and she has taught a wide range of audiences, from MBAs, executive MBAs, to many, many executive companies and corporations. Dr. Saunders has held a range of leadership roles in both academia and professional organizations, and serves on numerous executive boards, and has provided training and consulting to many Fortune 500 companies. Award-winning keynote speaker who we have the honor to listen to today as a keynote talk in our conference, and is ranked one of the top, or she actually was ranked among the top 8% of individuals in the field of operation management from a pool of over 738 authors from 237 schools. I love the stats involved. Her paper titled How to Use Big Data to Drive Your Supply Chain from the California Management Review has been the top most downloaded paper for 2017 and was listed as a must read. We can circulate it later. I am honored to be here, and I can't wait to hear your talk. Nada, take it away. Thank you for being here and for giving us your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. I wanted to say thank you also to ISF for everybody having me. I also wanted to say welcome to everybody, whether it is morning or evening. It is evening here or night. And I really very much hope that I get to meet all of you next year in person. I've been Zooming a lot like all of you, and I think at this point I'm a little zoomed out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk for about 45 minutes or so. I'm going to go through the slides, but I also want to just chat with you. I almost wish I was in the room with you where I could just actually just look at you and tell you stories about what I've learned. So, and then I'm going to leave 10, 15 minutes for Q&A. Also, I want to tell you that I will finish promptly on the hour. If, however, you have questions, just send me an email, offline. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you may have afterwards. So I'm going to be talking about our book called The Hume Machine that came out late of 2019. And this book was actually the culmination of research that went on for a few years and that it is still ongoing. We're actually still collecting more data now because things are changing. And I have to give you a little bit of background before I kind of go into this. So my co-author and I really started working with companies and interviewed dozens and dozens of CEOs, SVPs at, across industry sectors, trying to look to understand all the marvelous things that AI can do. And we went into this research with the idea of really sort of, I don't want to say worshiping AI and technology, but really trying to understand its full set, what it could do for the organization, the enterprise. What really surprised us as we went into this, after one interview after the other, is we realized, to our surprise, is the key to success to all the companies that we're leading was really less the technology and more the people, and integrating the people with the tech. So that's really where this whole concept of Hume Machine came about, because we began to see that that was the secret, what we observed, and we were really shocked over this. We are continuing, as I mentioned, this summer to gather more data, more evidence, and really evolve metrics along those lines. But before I kind of delve into this, I just have to tell you a little bit about myself. I mean, yeah, you've got the bio and all of that, but I actually have, in what seems like a past life, a really technical background. I'm an engineer. I have done a lot of coding, programming, and I share that with you because I don't come from the lens of being in leadership or org behavior. So, kind of really being able to talk about these issues of organizational structure and all of it was novel to me as well. It wasn't something that came naturally. So I want you to bear that in mind, is that through my career, I grew and I learned. It wasn't like I have a PhD in org behavior and I'm sharing with you what organizational behavior and human leadership should be. I really was quite geeky and nerdy in my own little world of coding. In fact, my first rude awakening that forecasting in corporations is different than what we do in academia was as a doctoral student, when I had access to this company and a full set of data. And I remember thinking, I was really into neural nets at the time. And I was sort of having this fantasy, I was going to get this data and I was going to come up with these great models, actually going into the company over and over and really kind of falling flat on my face because I didn't know what I was talking about, because I understood very slowly that the business world is a little bit different. So I'm going to go through what we have found in this research. And at the very end, I really want to give you some ideas, tips, because I think there are lessons for all of us. And one of those is that we have to grow and learn and really evolve our craft. And I'm doing it all the time. Look, if I have this talk next year, it's going to be different because I'm learning and gathering data. And we are in an ever-changing world where we have some really special skills in forecasting. We have to move with the times and evolve what we do till we could help the corporate, the business world, the global economy dealing with this, with COVID and all of it. So on that note, let me go ahead and start with the first slide. So one of the things that I find is that as I talk to companies, and even in academia, and I'm not sure which is more, is this sort of belief that maybe things aren't all that different today. I mean, after all, we've had technology forever, different kinds. So, one of the things that we have to note that underscores all of this is really what is different today. And it is fundamentally different in every aspect. Technologies associated with AI have decisively changed the competitive landscape and really how we work. Every aspect, it's everywhere. We see robots running factories. We see bots placing purchase orders. What does that mean? Well, it really means that how we run an organization, how we use technology, how we use our skills has to change in every way. Decision making, how we look at the screen, how we help humans be able to look at the data, because we do have these, inabilities to process data. But everything has really changed. If we look at every organization, whether it's a warehouse, whether it's a hospital, whether it is, any institution, I think the assumption that technology is an add-on, which is what I see in a lot of companies to this day, is wrong. I think our lens has to fundamentally change in every aspect, from people to the org structure to how we use that technology. So the next aspect that is different is those org structures, leadership styles, those that have worked in the past, they're rapidly becoming obsolete. One of the things that I have found, this requires understanding of how to make decisions. And I say that I'm thinking last year, right before COVID started, there was a company in Boston where I live that had an opening for senior analyst. Hundreds of people applied. And, when we're at a time when we might be hearing, well, people can't get jobs, pre-COVID, they couldn't fill the spot. Why couldn't they fill it? Well, basically what happened is every person that came in, they went through the interview process, then they were asked to look at the data that was given to them and to make decisions. The data that was provided was by state in the US, but the data was real data of the company, and it wasn't complete. Some of the states, Florida, Georgia, didn't have all the data. There was bad data. So all the candidates kept on coming in, and each one would develop a code, some in R, some in Python, based on the data, and then they would recommend to the company in the interview process what the company should do. But they would say, yes, but when it comes to these states, Georgia, Florida, we don't really have complete data, so we really can't quite say what we want to do about those. The company would say, that's the problem we have. We want somebody to be able to take the data that we have, understand the context, and know what we should do when we have data, when we have incomplete data, when we have wrong data, mismatched data. Hundreds of candidates came through. Finally, the company was able to find somebody that was able to achieve this. That is one of the issues. I talk to analysts all the time that can code, they can do anything, they can find correlations between your birthday and sunrise, you name it. We have so much data, but how do we actually make decisions within the context? The other thing related to this is that I'm seeing and finding is knowing what to ask of the data. We have so much data. It was a few years back where companies would say, oh, we need more data. We have too much data. The issue becomes now making sure the data is clean, that is validated, that we have processes to do this. I remember years before this, we were talking about the problems of dirty data. That is a whole nother talk, but dirty data is a real problem. And one of my, I have to say, personal pet peeves, because I have literally seen many times where I've walked into a meeting and I knew the data was not good. It was kind of garbagey, but somebody puts it on a PowerPoint. And once it goes on a PowerPoint, somehow we all believe it, right? It looks kind of slick, it looks kind of cool. And we're all like, wow, this must be true. It's on a PowerPoint. We have a lot of data now. We almost too much data. Well, what do we query? How do we query it? What do we ask that can then be taken to executives, to senior managers that can make decisions? That is a very big issue right now that I am finding, because analysts, people who have deep knowledge in analytics, can query anything. But what is relevant to ask of the data. So the environment has been fundamentally changed. Competition in the AI, in this age of AI, if you Google digital transformation, you could see it's been escalating. But one of the things that I've noticed, and I have worked with different colleagues on this, I've got multiple research teams, and we find this over and over again. Yes, DT is the #1 corporate concern. It was for 2019, 2020, and now for 2021. But 70% of DT initiatives don't reach their goals. In 2019, and I have left out 2020 because, as you know, 2020 was kind of a wash, right? Can't really look at that as really an outlier. But 1.3 trillion US dollars was spent, but 900 billion went to waste in 2019 of these transformation initiatives. 1/3 of the companies are really still taking a somewhat passive approach to AI. Many executives that we are finding kind of almost in shell shock, kind of taking in this wait and see approach. This was true pre-COVID. It continues to be true, because why? Well, lots of reasons we can go into, but it also costs money. And what moves do you make? How do you do it? A lot of questions to answer there. A lot of executives also see this as a kind of a plug and play solution. One more thing we add on, years ago we added on, Excel, you name it, you pick any software. Well, we can just continue to add on technologies, add on AI, add on deep learning. Well, it doesn't really work like that. The reality, what we have found, is just acquiring technology is simply not enough. What we observed is that the companies that were succeeding, that were seeing gains in this, were really forming a very different kind of agile enterprise. It was a new and intelligent form. And we all know that, that an intelligent enterprise is today completely data-driven. We have all this data, whether it's RFID, POS, sensors, social media posts. We have, structured, unstructured. We have visual data, maintenance logs, and all of this data has to be synthesized in a meaningful way. And think about, as I go through this, your own research and where it kind of plugs in, because there are human elements, there are visual elements, there are organizational elements, there are technological elements. They all need to work together because we have all these different kinds of data. We are drowning in it, but ultimately organizations, enterprises need to make, need to decide on the future, need to make forecasts, need to plan and answer the questions that are at hand in light of all of this, and be able to filter through the stuff that is just noise. So the intelligent enterprise, essentially, there's a circular process where we sense what is going on. And then from that sensing, we analyze, we predict or forecast, we respond. And then after that, we'll continue to gather data, gather intelligence from this. And I think, one of the things that oftentimes I think people forget, this is a very dynamic process. It's evolving. It's ongoing. I've been sort of amused a little, even here in the US, we watch people say, well, with COVID, as we all know, we kind of struggled with this. And, I hear people say, well, yeah, but they told us this last year. Well, yeah, they told you that last year based on the data that they had last year. And as we get more data, we evolve and we, replan and reforecast and then respond differently and gather more data. It's evolving. what is the issue for most companies? Let me see, I'm a little stuck here. Here we go. There are actually 4 stages. It starts with that data. But believe it or not, a lot of companies don't have the data digitized yet and have it available in real time. I've been really surprised when I talk to companies to see that that continues to be a bottleneck, because what they have to do is take the data, clean it. So you have to go through sensing, you capture it, you have to standardize it, you have to clean it. And then you have to turn data into information that is available to the different parties. That requires combining and filtering and structuring, creating, various reports. And not everybody needs every kind of information. And then we have firewalls and those kinds of things. So once we go into an organizational structure, it is a whole new reality in terms of propriety, security, and taking the data that we might, as in academia, developing models where we have data, to actually turn it into information that makes sense to a manager, executives, a CEO, and then insight. And insight is actual intelligence where they could visualize and use it to forecast beyond just the forecasting algorithms and models that we have. Right now, a lot of companies that are just struggling. They might have AI, deep learning, but they're also overriding systems because things are evolving and changing as COVID changes and we get new variants, and there's issues with geopolitics, and the algorithms don't have this. So we start with data, we move to information, then we get to insight, and then we take action. And this is where we have to have an organization that can adapt, that can orchestrate, that can automate, and they can respond. And then as we gather more data, turn it again into information, insight, action. And this is an evolving, dynamic process. Believe it or not, a lot of companies are still stuck in the data, and they still keep thinking, well, maybe if we hire a consulting company, or maybe if we get some kind of an AI tool, without realizing that this is a process. And as you all probably know, even those of us that have even taught basic stats, you can get, if you do good statistics with really good data, you can get a lot of really good insights. But adding technology onto bad data, I think, creates more problems. The enterprise is a system, and I think this is something we often forget. Every enterprise today is a system that is enabled by analytics, and the system has to be optimized. So if we're going to talk about, we could have technology and algorithm that's going to do, route optimization, excellent. But if we're actually going to talk about an enterprise, we have to understand that to get the greatest gains within the organization itself, and this is where I have been working at that level, it really needs to coordinate what I see as 4 levers within the enterprise. And it's really in lay terms, buy, make, move, and sell. Most of us know it as purchasing, operations is make, move is movement, transport, sell is really the marketing side. And we all know in the work that we do, I have colleagues that are in marketing. My own area is operations. We tend to be siloed, and we'll tend to optimize and develop algorithms and apps for each individual silo. What I have found is if they don't talk, if we don't optimize the system, I've seen companies fail over and over because of it, because marketing can sell beautifully, but if I can't deliver it, if I can't source the right items to make the item when they're needed, I'm not going to be able to respond as an enterprise, as a system. So one of the things that I've really seen as a huge challenge is for organizations to work as a system. And for us in the work that we do, to be able to work perhaps ideally in teams where we can offer solutions that can combine the knowledge that we have to, again, be able to have the organization respond as a system. So if we look at that, the buy, make, move, and sell, well, if we look at marketing, my gosh, we have these amazing AI technologies. We can optimize price, obviously cross-selling, in-store behavior analysis. I mean, it's really remarkable in terms of on the retail side what we can do. But again, we've seen this time and time again, especially today, where the challenge is that omni-channel and having the algorithms communicate and understand what is in the physical space, what is in the warehouse, what is online, and be able to do it in real time. It's a major challenge. And then be able to understand what is in transport, to understand what is happening on the make side in terms of facilities, production, capacity. We all know, we saw with COVID in the US what happened with toilet paper. I find the toilet paper story really interesting because from an operations standpoint, from a manufacturing standpoint, I mean, it is such a benign product. When you think about toilet paper and what that bill of materials look like and compare that to a vehicle, an electric car, and uh, computer, laptop, any device. I mean, it's nothing. Yet we couldn't scale up the production process. We couldn't switch transport from large pallets for toilet paper that was made for industrial use to consumer use. And it was really difficult. And of course, we see on the procurement side so many fantastic algorithms. I know a lot of companies that are using bots to, automate orders. But again, we need to be able to have these algorithms talk to one another. Because what's going to happen, and what happens over and over again, is if they're not doing it in real time, make or operations is not going to get the products what the customers want. And this is really a huge area for forecasting right now, because consumer demand with COVID is tremendously pent up. Forecasting, I know with the retail, the medical, all the areas, they're trying to figure out optimal ways to take what the algorithms are saying to override the system. Given the knowledge that they have in terms of what they're watching consumers do and want, at the same time to match that with what the production capacity is to be able to produce and deliver in real time. There's a lot of issues with regard to that. And I don't have I want to get to the human machine part. I don't have the time to talk to you, but it is incredibly interesting. And I think a time for, if ever forecasting was needed, it is now, because we are forecasting not only in the marketing, the demand side that I think most of us are used to. We are forecasting on the supply side. We are forecasting scarce resources. We're forecasting disruption. We are forecasting climate change. We're forecasting all kinds of things that are impacting the input side of the enterprise that is going into the production process and the movement of goods in order to be able to satisfy demand on the consumer side that is ever volatile, unlike anything we have ever seen. So as forecasters, we really have our plate full. You can't optimize these silos, the buy, make, move, and sell. Optimizing individual functional silos creates a fragmented approach, and it doesn't allow the enterprise to respond. So we need to have visibility to be able to see the environment, but we have to have real-time coordination connectivity, and we need to have ability to be able to connect the pieces in order to have this enterprise respond as a unit. And that is a huge challenge that I think really requires us to actually work with our own expertise, our own domains, if you will, to help enterprises really tackle this. Um, so, rebuilding these enterprises that has pre-COVID and now post-COVID really requires, as they move into this digital environment, to optimize the system and look at these levers together as opposed to individually. And that's a huge challenge. Organizational structures have historically really been separated. The early part of my career, I can't tell you how many times, I've heard, well, marketing does this, but in operations, as an operations person, operations people would say, well, we don't know, they don't talk to us. Well, I'm still hearing it. And to be honest with you, I've been doing this for a while, and it's like, come on, this has got to stop. We have to work together in academia, and we definitely have to work together in the enterprise, because otherwise what the organization is seeing is not connecting in real time as a unit, as a living organism. It isn't able to respond. We've done executive surveys. I have a research team. We do this all the time. Our most recent one shows 88% companies state technology, AI is their priority. 72% have said for this coming year, 2021, they're going to make sizable technology investments. However, 83% have concerns regarding costs of technology and of adoption. Where do they turn to? What do they do? What do they adopt? 85% say they're awash in data, and 82% are engaged in fragmented implementation efforts. It is really, really hard when you look at organizational incentive systems, the way they're structured in academia. We have the same thing, right? We have publishing, tenure, journals. That's a whole nother story, but same kind of thing. We need to work together. How do we get there so it's not fragmented is, I think, a real challenge. What I have found is, in my research and working with these companies, I identified really 4 what I called analytical ruts that companies have gotten themselves into. The first 2 that I have on the slide here, the first one I called a needle in a haystack. This is where what I've seen a lot of is companies using analytics randomly in the search for relationships with the hope that something will eventually turn up. Now, you guys are out there, you all know, right, that if we do enough runs, we're going to find correlations. We're going to find a lot of false positives, things that are, peer correlated that aren't. But that's kind of what I see in a lot of companies, where basically this massive search where analysts are at it just trying to find something related to something else. What is causal to something else appears to be causal. A real issue with that if we don't know what to ask of the data and have certain context knowledge. The other thing that I find are islands of excellence. This is where we use analytics to optimize sub-processes. So I find that we have functions that are highly efficient, but they have little bearing on optimizing the system. And you all know theory of constraints, TOC. Theory of constraints is alive and well. And so I can take an enterprise, I can optimize a sub process, but it's the most inefficient process that is going to be my bottleneck, my longest process, and it's going to hold me up. And so that's ultimately what happens. The other thing that I see a lot of is what I call measurement minutia. It's just trying to measure everything. Most companies have so many KPIs, they don't know what to focus on. And related to this is this, analysis paralysis, this really overwhelmed with the rapid change of technology, technological capability, where companies, they know they have to do something, but they're not really sure what to do. I think personally, one of the benefits for academia, where really we come in, is that we, unlike consulting companies, we can actually do a lot of good. Consulting companies are out there, they are offering solutions, but they get paid for that. We get paid to do research, scholarly research that isn't biased and hopefully not biased. And I think that we really have a significant role to play today, given where companies are stuck. Some of the barriers to implementation, I essentially have found three areas: people, processes, and technology, and they really overlap. So what happens is people that are, or sorry, scholars that are maybe more in the OB space, they might focus on leadership, on people, but that's not enough. In the IT space, we have problems with clean data, upgrading systems, old systems in place, and the processes in the process area, problems with organizational silos, lack of proper incentives. And the issue, and the reason I have these circles overlapping, is they really need to work together. So what companies a lot of times think, well, okay, we've got the people, let's lay off the senior folks with domain knowledge, hire a bunch of analysts, purchase a bunch of IT, get a consulting company in place, but we're not going to change your processes. And what I'm arguing with you, and what I'm telling you, that what we've observed with some really amazing companies, some that are, public knowledge, others I have an NDA I can't name, but we've seen companies like Haier, like, Siemens, like Schneider Electric. These companies are changing processes simultaneous to the technologies, to AI, to people. It has to work together. So that's where we realized is there is an emerging form of enterprise. We called it the human machine. We labeled it that way as we saw that this wasn't just one thing, but it was this enterprise, just like a living organism, that we saw emerging. And I can tell you, with COVID, my co-author John Wood and I, we felt that pre-COVID, the technology and the human machine enterprise, all of it was kind of a carrot. We feel that COVID has kind of been a stick, where companies really have to get on board, because many of them, I don't think, will be around in the next year if they don't really embrace some of the things that we're talking about. And those of you in academia doing research, I think this is your time to help. But this enterprise, as I told you at the very onset, combines the better qualities of humans: creativity, innovation, compassion, judgment, with the mechanical efficiencies of machines, economies of scale, big data processing, AI, and it combines humans and machines in a symbiotic relationships as co-workers. And this isn't science fiction. I mean, we're seeing it already here, and companies that are doing well, that are on the threshold. Every time we went in to see how are they using their AI, we realized it wasn't the AI, it was really the people. Why does this work? Well, it's based on something called Moravec's paradox, although all of you, can look at, the research, and there's an entire body of literature, some amazing people that we have in the, International Institute of Forecasters, some of my good friends. But as counterintuitive as it may seem, the best way to take advantage of emerging AI technology is to really invest in human resources, in reskilling, in upskilling, and lifelong learning. And this is explained by Moravec's paradox, that basically tells us where humans are gifted, machines are deficient, and vice versa. And leading companies essentially leverage these two. If we look at Moravec's paradox in management, I think we could see that there is this complementarity that takes place between what machines can do and what humans can do. Machines can process large amounts of data. They have precision, they have accuracy. There's a huge, again, literature just documents this over and over again. They have strength, they have speed. But what can't they do? Well, they're only as good as the data that they're based on. In times of change, like what we're seeing now with the pandemic, they don't have all that knowledge. They lack creativity and innovation. In fact, I don't have time to go into it here, but if we look at some of the, breakthrough innovation companies, most of it comes from humans being able to connect some very disparate ideas and have these aha moments. And machines really can't do that. They also cannot explain their decisions. And I can tell you, in the business world, at the end of the day, oftentimes it's humans working with humans, and they want an explanation. I just last week talked to some leading companies, and it really came down to that, where they needed humans to explain how the outcome was or how they came about the outcome. They needed to explain that to their large customers, and an algorithm can't do that. And also machines, well, they lack empathy, emotion, because sometimes you have to look beyond the data and maybe look the other way with coworkers or subordinates, because there may be personal issues going on to keep a good culture going. What humans can do? Well, we can connect unrelated areas. We are creative and innovative. We can explain decisions, and we have empathy and emotion, but we cannot, with processing limitations, with physical limitations. God, we're so inconsistent. And just look at all the work of Kahneman and, these famous authors. I mean, we show that over and over again. I mean, the body of literature on cognitive biases is horrendous. And, I remember years ago, reading Hogarth and, going through his book, Judgment and Choice, and just falling, having each of those biases. But there are things that we offer, and together we complement one another. What are some of the human machine traits that we have observed? Well, surprisingly, these organizations that we call human machine are really more human centric. They really cater to making sure that every aspect of that human creativity, that interaction with the technology takes place. The visual connectivity is a really big part of that. And I know a lot of colleagues who are working in this space, because again, as humans, we can only process information. So how it's presented to us and how it's fed to us so we can make the best decisions is actually a pretty big deal. A human machine has intentionality and purpose. What we have discovered and found that these are organizations that really go beyond pure profit. Unfortunately, yes, I mean, companies have to be profitable, but that is not sufficient. Companies moving forward, thriving, need to have a greater purpose and connect humans to that greater purpose. What we found is that AI technology then is adopted to support that greater vision in the human machine. The relationships are meaningful inside the company, outside the company, with suppliers. And look at, like, now what's going on with COVID, supply chains. I mean, companies that are doing well are those that have these relationships. Same thing, with customers. They're not just to transact, but to actually have relationships. A big issue is systems thinking. I found that, that is a real issue. It's a problem in the organization, a problem in academia, to be able to see the system and to see the people, to understand the process, all the employees at every level as they work together in unison with the technology. To also have flexible organizational structures. We find that human machine companies are flexible, amoeba-like. Different organizations have different versions of it. Hire, Google, Zappos, they all have their own little version of it, but they're flatter structures and they move, uh, teams that form and separate out based upon what the need is. These integrated work teams emerge, they separate, emerge again based upon what's going on. And they combine physical, virtual environments. I think with COVID, we've definitely seen obviously virtual environments, but I think the idea that we're going to go back to a pure physical is not going to happen. I think, again, it's going to be this ideal way that we have both and optimize both. And how that's done, I think it's going to vary from human machine type to human machine type. But this human machine, as you can see, is in an organization, if you will, that is a living entity that combines machines or AI with humans in an organizational structure that is flexible and volatile, where the whole system works together and uses aspirational and measurable metrics together, as opposed to purely measurable metrics that I think we've seen a lot of organizations in the past. I have a framework here, and I'm going to go through this quickly just to make sure that I don't run out of time. And as I mentioned to you at the onset, feel free to email me after this. I'm happy to respond to any questions you might have. But what we've seen is this really starts with developing a purpose or a vision of a company, to then be able to really kind of segment and define. And when I say segment, then use technology for various market segments, because the organizational structures might be different for each one. Shift from contractual to more meaningful relationships, and then adopt technology to support this vision and to integrate people at the same time. And there are various ways that we have found to work that really help companies do this. You can't just buy the technology and implement it on Monday and have it all work. It does not work. Create flexible structures, breaking down silos. Implementing steps to really cultivate talent. Talent is scarce. People that are innovative, creative, you have to cultivate them and you have to keep them. We've heard a lot about, acquiring talent and companies, wanting to compete for talent. One of the issues is to keep the talent. You can't just acquire talent. You want to keep talent as a company. And that means that talent is getting very particular about wanting to enhance their and grow their creativity. Companies need to invest their people, and how valuable the human resource is in this space. And move from traditional productivity measures where you clock in and clock out to other kinds of aspirational metrics. Companies that are doing this are the human machines that are doing very well. Some of the implementation lessons are that, beginning with a vision. I think companies have to have a vision. Companies that I'm watching now that are trying to survive and thrive and come out of this, COVID paralysis, if you will, are reformulating what that vision is, assessing the current state and allocate sufficient resources. We can't just talk about it. We have to really allocate resources, not just to consultants and technology itself, but to training and paying people well. It's just a huge issue, and not to underestimate what talent is worth. Investing more in people. And by the way, there are so many research aspects here, from people that are really purely on the technology end to understand what to query, what the problems are, to people that are in the org behavioral space and judgment to really understand, how to motivate people, how the organizational structures work, to actually, HR in terms of how to reskill. All of this requires investing more in people. For companies, leveraging insiders to create a culture of belonging, because we have found over and over again, pre-COVID and now with COVID, that people want a culture of belonging. I was in a call just 2 weeks ago with a group of folks that are actually forecasting the labor market. Those of you may be aware that there is a labor shortage right now in many aspects. So there's forecasting. We're trying to forecast the labor market. Well, you know, what's turning out, what I heard on this call, I'm not an expert in the labor market, but what I found interesting is that COVID has changed the way we think and that workers think. And I was really surprised to find out that, you know, laborers are saying, you know, yeah, I want to get paid more, but guess what? I want better working conditions. I want childcare. I want a hybrid environment, and I want all of it. And if you can't, as a company, give it to me, well, you know what? I don't need this. I was really surprised to hear that. I didn't know that either. And maybe some of you know this, but I didn't. So, you know, people want a culture of belonging, and it's, I think, even more acute now, having come out of the pandemic. Utilizing people for more focused decision making, but then leaving technology for other tasks and then integrating them is really, really important. Not everything in a company can be or should be what we call bot sourced. We created the term bot sourcing as outsourcing. You should not bot source everything. And there's some tasks and some interactions, some forecasting tasks that we have to leave to humans, where they leverage AI in order to be able to make that ultimate forecast. One of the things we found is companies do well to start with pilot. And we also found that everyone through this process has to be prepared for a very different workplace for the future. And I'm moving through because I have just a couple more slides and I really am running short, but I wanted to give you some concluding thoughts. Technologies associated with AI have completely changed the competitive landscape. We found that to be true. As I mentioned, we ended our research right before COVID. We are continuing it and finding that what we thought was true pre-COVID is now true more than ever. Everything that I've shared with you. Even more important now is to really understand what to query in the data, what to ask. Critical thinking, given the data that we have, the algorithm output is more important than ever. And creative problem solving that goes beyond what deep learning can do right now. And how that evolves is, you and I both know, and I say you because I'm talking to each and every one of you, we all know it's going to look very different, right? In a year, in 2 years, and it's rapidly changing. Jobs in the analytics era are going to evolve more than ever, integrating people, not replacing people. And it's going to require a very different leadership style to make this happen. The Hue machine, what we believe is a concept that takes advantage of, again, both humans and machines in a very symbiotic relationship. For companies to survive and to really thrive and advance in the era of AI, they have to understand that technology is not just another initiative. What I've shared with you is what I believe, what we believe, my research team, is that it really takes us to really switch the lens and to look at it completely differently. Again, not just another add-on, which I think to this day, there are still companies and researchers that see AI that way. It's really necessary to develop an awareness and the ability to harness this power. And there are so many touch points for this that are really important in order for it to work. One of the challenges is that one size does not fit all. And this domain knowledge is also going to be industry specific, whether you're in healthcare, whether you're in retail, whether you're in technology, whether you're in transportation, right? It's unique. I mean, what's happening in shipping, just, look at issues that happened with the Suez Canal, and we were combining technology to make some forecasts versus what, shipping experts kind of coming in and chiming in. What it's going to require for companies is to create their own Hue machine. And my last statement that I want to conclude with, a few years back, Eric Schmidt, chairman of Alphabet, said, People keep saying, what happens to jobs in the era of automation? He said, I think there will be more jobs, not fewer, and that your future is you with a computer, not you replaced by a computer. I believe very much that that is true, but it's also going to require all of us to have a little bit of a different skill set. Not just laborers, not just workers, not just analysts, but professors too, all of us. So on that note, thank you. And I will open it up for Q&A.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nada. Fascinating, fascinating presentation. Bring on the questions, raise your hand. We have the ability to hear some voices. So George is going to help me unmute. So we will hear some voices, or type your question in as well. And we'll see how far we go in terms of timing. George, can you unmute Nicholas, who is going to be our first one? First question, bring it on.
Thanks a lot for a great talk.
Thank
I'm
you.
particularly interested in the element you mentioned about the breaking through silos. I'm all on board for the human-centric approach, but one thing I've seen from my experience working with industry is that different parts of organizations may be more ready for this human scene, as you coin it, and other parts may be more resistant. So how do we tackle this different speed of adoption of this new thinking?
No, I agree with you completely. So this is why I mentioned to you, it actually has to come from senior leadership. It has to come from the C-suite that actually restructures. There's a lot of different ways to do it, and I've seen it done very well, where they create a board, an advisory board that actually creates teams of people from different areas, different silos working together. And I've actually seen this work very, very well, but it requires, it has to come from the very top, Nicholas. What happens, and again, I've seen this again over and over, I've seen the same kind of thing with years ago with lean, where companies will say, we're committed to lean, and then they would, just implement it in one section of the company, and it never really takes hold because the entire enterprise can't move forward. We're seeing this a lot with AI and technology, where they think, oh, well, we'll have this other part of the organization, they're ready, let them implement it. The problem that's going to occur is you're going to have bottlenecks, as you know. Now, the severity of those bottlenecks and the degree to which you can automate is going to depend upon industry. So you take the auto industry, you take electric cars, take what Tesla's doing, and then you counter that with, certain companies in the fashion industry, you counter that with retail, you counter that with, other industry sectors, right? And the degree of automation, the degree of readiness, and what you can automate, and domain knowledge, and the progress is going to vary, and how you break the silos down is going to vary. There are some industry sectors that are going to be highly automated, and again, I just was talking to somebody in Tesla a few days ago, so I keep bringing up Tesla, but you can automate some areas much more readily. There are other industries that are going to have a much more difficult time. Bottom line, it's going to have to come from the top, and as if you're doing safe search or consulting in this area, there's nothing as an outsider that you can do unless the directive comes from the top. And again, as I mentioned, I've seen this work well, where they actually restructure, they create an advisory board that actually creates a project plan of moving everybody forward, that actually deliberately breaks down the silos and enables innovation to take hold. And at the end of the day, a huge part of that is incentives. I mean, we all respond to incentives. You and I, right, in academia, what I'm told to publish in, that's what I do. In a corporate setting, same kind of a thing. It's going to be incentives, in terms of how they perform. It has to come from the very, very top. And if they're not committed to do it, there's not going to be a whole lot that you can do. But as researchers, we can still pilot project, maybe a research idea that we have in the silo that we're working in. And that doesn't prevent us from maybe being able to showcase or test our research in a particular silo, but that's the best that we can do.
I love as somebody who teaches a lot of project management, and my area of focus is project management. The fact that you mentioned that everything needs a good plan is music to my ears. There's a couple of questions in the Q&A. If we can, if you have another couple of minutes to answer a couple of questions that have come in. So one question, Mahesh Joshi is asking a question related to the HuMachine's traits. You mentioned aspirational metrics. Can you give examples of aspirational metrics to get people thinking in that direction?
Yeah, so rather than, the sheer performance in terms of, what your output is, per day or per month or per week, have it be something more in terms of, some creative issue or some goal that you're trying to set, whether it be, a creative product, innovation, or something like that. One of the things I've even seen, and I'm going to bring this back to academia because I think that we're all kind of in that space. I've seen a few universities where they have moved away from just counting numbers of the number of pubs you have. You got to have so many pubs in this list of journals, and have it be a fewer number of pubs where they actually will tenure somebody with, 2 pubs or 1 pub that is truly novel, breakthrough, creative, that, breaks the paradigm in terms of thinking. And I think that is really important because otherwise we're just becoming rote. We're becoming robots. And I know in academia, we all say, as we talk to each other, hey, how many pubs do you need for tenure, right? Do you need this many? What's your journal list? But what if we didn't do that? What if we allowed ourselves to say, maybe I want to do something that is so out of the box that I end up just breaking the mold, and have the university look and say, wow, this is putting us on the map. We're going to give this person tenure. So that's really kind of what I'm thinking. But what happens is it's tough. And this requires creativity in those metrics as well. But as humans, for us to perform at that level, it's really difficult if we are told that you have to clock in and clock out and you have to have this number and what was your quota. You have to have that, what I call it blue sky. Obviously I have to go blue sky, but to just sort of dream and to let your mind be creative as opposed to that pressure where, I got to get the number out. That's really, I think, where organizations need to move and to train their people to ideate differently, to move away from traditional, and there are ways, I don't have time to go into it now, but I'm happy to talk offline, to move away from traditional scenario planning that we know it, and to move it to a different way to ideate, so we can kind of break the innovation boundaries in teams and how we do that.
Brilliant. That's so helpful. And a related question from Andrei Vasnev, who asks, it's kind of related because you brought up the example of academics and their tenure process, but the question is, have you seen HuMachine universities? So have you seen this applied in the university context, in higher ed context? We have a lot of silos within universities. I've taught, and written a case around digital transformation of higher ed. How have you seen the concept of HuMachine apply to universities?
Great question.
Fascinating question. Yeah.
It's actually a really great question. And I have to say one that I'm especially frustrated on because, and I'm so delighted that we're doing this. I really think that as IIF and what we do in our meetings, in our annual meetings, we have a tremendous opportunity to be able to do that. I've enjoyed our conferences because I thought that we are the most interdisciplinary than any other conference that I go to, and I have found that I believe that in academia we are lagging. My own school I guess I can openly say that we are trying. Northeastern is trying very hard to sort of eliminate location and time through technology, so that we can use technology so that our students can be accessible anytime, anywhere. We are also, we have a lot of positions that are across colleges. And we're really fostering that. Those are not rare. Those are actually very common. Are we a Hugh machine? I'm very proud of my institution, and we're working towards something that I really think will get there. Having said that, I think generally speaking, I think academia is really stuck. And I really think that we in academia can't afford to do that. We are going to lose our jobs. We are going to be outmoded, and we're going to be outmoded by consulting companies that are going to come. We really can be at the top of the food chain in all of this, but we're still stuck in, well, how many pubs do I need? You know, and journals. You know, that's why we have our flagship journals that, you know, originally, you know, Scott Armstrong and everybody started them. They're starting because we want to be able to publish replicable novel research. But I think academia needs to move along the lines as well. I think it's a great question, and I hope those that are in senior leadership posts are able to do that.
Yeah, it's a great point. In higher ed, there's a lot of articles that I've been reading recently around the value and what is going to happen in the post-COVID world to higher ed. Now that we know what's possible to deliver in terms of virtual and hybrid, we know the value proposition that universities have typically stood behind. How do those things march together into the future? It's a good question for each one of us, both on the academic side as faculty, but also as administrators. So fascinating. We can have a whole session just on that. One last question from Ben here. Ben Samet. Ben asks, where siloed KPIs are in place, is it possible to move away from the islands of excellence approach? Is it possible to break those silos? And can you maybe talk a little bit about how companies can get there?
No, I think it's a great question. I think if you have very siloed KPIs, I think it's really difficult to do that. I would almost argue probably impossible. Look, if you're in marketing and you are being purely evaluated on your sales, so what is the number or the quota in the sales that you're making? You don't care if it's being delivered, right? What do you care that maybe operations is out of stock? Or what do you care that a transport of goods is stuck in the Suez Canal or at the port of LA or whatever it is? You made your sales quota, you're done, right? And so, you know, just like our students, you know, I always, when I make my syllabus, I'd say, you know, my students, they're human. Whatever I put on, we could talk all this nice stuff, blah, 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 but at the end of the day, they will respond to what they're graded on, what the incentive is. People have families, they earn a living, they work in a company. I think it's exceptionally rare for anybody to want to reach out beyond what those KPIs are. And so I don't really think that is possible. Again, I think it comes up to senior leadership, and those KPIs absolutely must change. We're maybe in an S&OP kind of a format, and then you have a joint KPI that marries operations and sales together. But as long as those are siloed, and again, classic is sales versus operation, that might just strictly be looked at. What are your inventory turns? How much inventory you have? What's your cash flow in terms of inventory? You don't care if you have enough stock on hand. I mean, you just want to turn your inventory. Sales wants to sell or make the quota. You're never going to move forward, in my opinion.
Thank you so much, Nada. That was an excellent session. I think, George, we're just a few minutes behind, so hopefully we're not putting people too much behind. But thank you for the great questions, and hopefully you reach out if you have further questions. It was great to be here with everybody this evening, and I look forward to seeing you throughout the rest of the conference. So thank you so much.
Thank you to both Nada and Yael.
I do, Dale. Thank you, George.
Thank you, George. Have a great evening,
everybody.
morning, afternoon, whatever time it is for you. So.